Okay, so let's talk about your writing journey because I'm sure that there are writers listening, and I find your journey inspiring. Um, first off, I wanted to know how long ago did you start writing this novel, and what was your journey like? Don't be embarrassed; it's inspiring.
I don't even know what year I actually started writing it. I know before we met, I had started writing it in bits and starts,
Hmm. Okay.
right? And I knew I wanted to write it, but I didn't know what it would look like.
Hmm.
I'm not even sure at
Yeah.
that point I had conceived of, okay, there'll be this 5-person coven
Hmm.
doing this work. It was nothing like, or totally not as good as what it is now. You learn to
Hmm.
write by writing,
Exactly.
right? And also, everyone
Exactly.
says on your second book is, much better writing than your first book. For me, my short solarpunk fiction, I feel like is better written than
Hmm.
the novel.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to say to writers because you know. So I want to just say it again. You learn to write by writing, and some people write short stories. They learn how to write through writing short stories, and then they write their first novel. A lot of people do that. I didn't do that. All of my drafts are learning how to write. So that's okay too.
I don't even remember why I decided writing short fiction exactly. Um, I didn't have a calling to it. It wasn't, I love long novels. I love to sink my teeth into them and thought that's what my next project would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it more was um, becoming a member of Brooklyn Speculative Fiction Writers and starting to read short fiction and critique it together. Well, first of all, shout out to all my wonderful critique partners and our critique groups at BSFW. You all have really helped me hone my craft much better. Um, and it was the influence of so many of the people in that large writing group who write short fiction that I said, maybe I'll, try that. So I think no matter what you write is your second thing, even if it's long
Mm-hmm.
form, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably better written than.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. My second novel is better written than my first. Yeah, it's true. Um, yeah. Um, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that so you started in your early 30s, let's say, as sort of writing this book, and then you had periods of time because you were working full time, so you had periods of time when you weren't working, writing, right? And then there are periods of time. This is my sense of it. So maybe let me turn this into a question. So did you write all, like, what was your practice of writing?
I wasn't the kind of disciplined writer to say every day or this many times a week, I'm going to sit down and write for however many hours. I didn't have that discipline, but I also came to honor my way that if I wasn't ready to sit down and write, it was because
Mhm.
whatever needed to come through hadn't come through yet. So I found
Absolutely.
over the years that taking walks, long walks, is what would spur, okay, this next piece that goes on
Hmm.
paper. But it was a much longer span of time to get to those long walks that generated the ideas and the next steps of whatever story I was
Hmm.
working on. Um, like I'd say that was 10 to the 1 of actually writing
Hmm.
those things out. Like once I got there,
Yeah.
through those walks and whatever, then I could sit down and knock it out
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Yeah. My sense of things is that we had a similar pattern where like it almost for me, like it almost has to build up, has to like build up, build up, build up, and then boom, and then it comes out really quickly. So what were your biggest challenges in writing the book?
You might remember this from being someone who gave me editorial feedback for a few drafts, but putting enough tension in my story seemed to be my biggest challenge. And I think it's even my biggest challenge with my short fiction that's come out. I've gotten some traction with that short fiction. I have a number of pieces published, but still, as I write, like building in enough tension. I don't like to necessarily call it conflict because it isn't, especially in solarpunk, always what we call conflict in kind of the hero's journey sense of conflict. Even though the working is structured a little more like that than some of my short fiction, but enough tension to keep the plot moving because I like to read what's going on with a character, even if the plot isn't moving so much when I'm reading a story. And so, the whole thing about cutting your darlings or killing your darlings as a writer, I have so many scenes I've cut out of this book that I'm planning to release them as supplements to the working at some point. Yeah, I thought that would be a fun thing.
Yeah, that's a fun thing. Yeah.
Yes, so you all can look
that.
forward to seeing some of the scenes and chapters that I cut.
The director's cut.
Yeah, the director's cut. I don't think anyone would want to read the director's cut with everything put into it.
There's a reason why.
Yeah, there's a reason why they were cut. So I'd say that was my biggest challenge. And the fun challenge was finding out what the working actually is. But yeah, the tension thing. And I found that I was pretty good at, I was writing 5 points of view, which for a novice novelist, they say, don't do that. 5 points of view, what are you, crazy? You really have to give different voices to each character, make them distinct. And that's not so easy, but I found through the different drafts, I think I did a decent job of that, if I say so myself. We'll see what everybody says. So that wasn't as much of a challenge as just keeping the tension there. Especially as I would shift through the different points of view in the chapters.
Yeah, let's talk about those different points of view, those characters. So you have characters of races that are not your race. And I'm just wondering, and obviously you're a very conscientious person and would never want to misrepresent. So I'm wondering, how did you navigate that?
Partly through just the work I do in community that's the anti-racism work and the anti-colonial work that I do. I had some sense of how to portray people of different backgrounds than me, but also I did have BIPOC readers. And of course, no one Black person represents all Black people and can give me, here's the stamp of approval for all my Black characters. But, it's my hope that I represented people well and, I did my best with that. My intention was to write from my background, my point of view, and not overstepping.
Yeah, and I remember we talked about this, you also wanted representation beyond just your point of view. I think a lot of writers sort of struggle with this. You know, they want to represent, but they don't want to appropriate.
I've also taken a couple workshops with Writing the Other, a wonderful
Oh.
group who helps writers write other than their own, ethnicity, race, whatever. They put out
That's
some
great.
really good work. But yeah, you're right. I wanted diversity, and it's a balance to do that. I didn't want these all to be white characters. I didn't want any readers to just assume this character is not of their own background. And my characters are diverse sexualities also. There's LGBTQ plus characters, particularly lesbian and bi characters. But let's say there's queer characters in the book. Yeah. And
So let's
straight
talk
characters in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about your publishing journey, because that's always something that writers want to know about. So what was your journey like?
Yeah, I initially set out to find an agent, as many writers do. And I had some requests for full and partial manuscripts from agents, but people passed. I'm trying to think how many queries I said. I don't have the stats in my head, but I probably sent out 60 to 70 queries to agents, got many passes, got like a handful or even less, a couple of full requests, and a couple of partial requests, but people ultimately passing. And then I thought, by the time I find an agent, I had my ancestors nudging me, get this out to the world, right? So by the time I find an agent, and then the agent shops the novel to publishers. It could take a year to get an agent, at least a year to land a bigger publisher, and then another year or two for it to go to press if it's a bigger publisher. I was like, there's some really great up-and-coming small presses. So meanwhile, I did get discouraged. I did put it out to some small presses, some of whom I didn't hear back from, or for a long time. Some of my dream small presses I did finally hear back from, and they passed, but they gave me some wonderful feedback. I kind of put it down. I was discouraged about getting the novel out, even knowing my ancestors were like, get it out, and turned to my short solarpunk fiction because I was having some success with that, and I really enjoyed writing that particular solarpunk future I've been writing. And then I went to an online writing conference, Flights of Foundry, which is coming up the end of September, and I'll be there again, probably on the program in a bigger way this year. And my publisher, then wasn't yet my publisher, Water Dragon Publishing, offered a pitch session. And I didn't have anything else I was going to then. I said, oh, what the hell, I'll go to that. And I didn't have anything rehearsed. I had, my query letters that I had been sending out, but I hadn't looked at them a long time. And the publisher and some of the authors from the press were lovely. It was a very informal session. I said, I'm here just spontaneously. And they said, well, give us your pitch. And I did. And they said, oh, that's wonderful. And they requested my manuscript. So I said, okay. And then I got it out actually to a few more presses, thinking, okay, if I have it out, I better turn back to trying to get the work out to different
Yeah.
presses. Um, and I forget how many months, like maybe 3 months later, I heard from the managing editor, like, we want your book. We'd love
That's
to
great.
publish it if you'd have us. And then I checked them out. It turns out that somebody in one of my communities is also published by them.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I like what's important to me are covers. I
Mm-hmm.
like that covers are given attention to, and I like the
Mm-hmm.
covers I saw on their site for the most part. Um, and I decided, well, I was at the point like, I don't know, should I self-publish? Just my ancestors were still nudging me, like, turn
Yeah.
back to this
Yeah.
book and get it out.
Yeah.
And I know the heavy lift of self-publishing or what that can be. I decided, you
Yes.
know what? I'm going to go with it. And the one
Mm-hmm.
thing about a small press that's lovely, well, in some ways lovely, is a quick turnaround to get the book to print.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little
What
bit
was it?
crazy making, but
Mm-hmm.
well, because I just happened to mention to Stephen, the managing editor, in passing, that I was going to be at ReaderCon this year in Boston um, with my Brooklyn speculative fiction writer friends. He said, "Oh, well, we often have a table at ReaderCon, in the dealer's room. Let's speed up the publication schedule and try to get it out in time for ReaderCon." And I'll tell you, the downside to that was that I didn't have a couple months ahead of it going to print to send
Mm-hmm.
ARCs out and get
Mm-hmm.
blurbs, ahead of it really coming out.
Yeah.
But we're going to do a second printing to catch some of those wonderful reviews from noted authors that are coming in for my book that I'm very
Nice.
proud of. Um, and so that made me feel better about that. And we did indeed, by the skin of the teeth, get the book to ReaderCon, and
So how
also
many
get
months
this
are?
beautiful cover out. Oh, it was 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. People
What?
will want to know.
Yeah, I think I had to turn in my final manuscript. Because then when he said, "Yeah, we'd love your book," and I looked at the contract and decided, yes, okay. Then it was this frantic couple months of honing the
Mm-hmm. Right.
manuscript to get it into much better shape because I hadn't read it even for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I had that going on for a couple months. I think probably more like January that we had a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to turn in what I deemed my final version of the manuscript by the end of March. And ReaderCon is in July,
Mm-hmm.
mid-July.
Yes.
So we also had to come up with a cover, and I'm thrilled with this cover that Sleepy Fox Studios, Kelly
Yeah, it's a
from
beautiful
Sleepy Fox
cover.
Studios, yeah, and it was great that she worked with me um, to come up with something that I loved also, But that was a really quick process to get there, so I'm thrilled that worked out. Um, the passes on the editing of the book and deciding on the cover and the language on the cover and all that got very condensed so that we could go to print for
Mm-hmm.
ReaderCon. And that was the first time I saw my books because he had them
Wow.
shipped directly to ReaderCon, to the dealer's
Wow.
table there. Another author from the press was kind of staffing that table for much of the time. And
How did that feel?
I have a video out of me saying, "Here's my book. I'm holding my book for the first time." I'm standing outside of the hotel there at ReaderCon doing that. I was like, well, first of all, my manuscript's something like 93,000 words. I didn't have a clear sense of how many pages of a print book that would be. And it's about 400 pages. It's a
Hmm.
thick book. It's the kind of novel I love to really sink my
Hmm.
teeth
Hmm.
into.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
it was fun to see that. It surprised me that it was that thick.
Nice. Sense of accomplishment. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, I remember when I, first picked up Bridget's Charge, I just, I'm sure I cried. It was a long time ago, but I'm sure I cried. I'm sure like it was just, an overwhelming sensation of gratitude, as I recall,
And I
just for,
remember how happy you are with the artwork on the cover of Bridget's Charge,
mhm.
which is beautiful and really
Yeah,
captures the essence of the novel
yeah,
also.
yeah, yeah. I also went with a small press, and it was not my first choice, but they came to me, and I was just at a point where I was feeling discouraged as well, and I thought, okay, let's do it. Like they were ready to go, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, my press was smaller than yours, and it was just, yeah, it was an amazing experience. Well, let's talk about what comes next for you. You mentioned you're working on short fiction, short solar punk fiction. Do you have another novel in mind?
As I honed the working and left it where I left it, and also
Mm-hmm.
tipping it more into solar punk, I can now
Mm-hmm.
see a sequel
Mm-hmm.
to the working. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something, but more immediately, I am working on a nonfiction witchcraft book
Oh.
based on some workshops that I've put out on solar punk witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be shopping that, and but I have out to some small presses my solar punk fiction collection. That
Mm-hmm.
really, because it's all set in the same solar punk future, but in different time periods and different
Mm-hmm.
characters, even though some of the stories refer back to other stories,
Mm-hmm.
it can be considered either a mosaic novel, a term I just learned about, or a novel in stories is another
Mm-hmm.
term. So I'm shopping that collection now.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Great.
those stories. I really want to get that out to the world.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh. Well, my second novel is not published. It's been done for quite a while. I always have to put it in quotation marks because I think it's done, but if I read it again, I might go, But it has not been published, and I'm I'm sitting with whether to go with a small press um, or not. I'm not sure. It's hard to let go of that, agent dream thing. It really has a hold on you. Even though I had a fantastic experience with my first novel in the small press, I also know it was a tremendous amount of work. But it's a different time now. Also, things have really changed. So that's one thing. And then I'm working on a third novel. I have discovered, not intentionally, but I have discovered that I have a niche which seems to be family history. So my first novel is about an ancestor who was accused of giving birth to the Jersey Devil. My second novel is loosely based on my search for my little sister who was given up for adoption. This was all pre-internet, pre-DNA, so everything was by hand. And then my third novel is about my search for my grandfather. I found out that he is not who I thought he was. And so that's also going to be both contemporary and historical. So there's going to be the searching in the present and then the grandmother's story, you know, and then the immigrant, then there'll be the immigrant story. That's fun. This has been amazing to talk with you today, Bright Flame, and I can easily see that we could have more conversations, like maybe even, I don't know, a live stream or something, like just talking about the writing process, or like just talking about the publishing process, because we just really were able to just touch on little things. So if that is of interest to you and to other people, they should let us know and we'll do it.
Even what other guests would be fun to bring into this conversation?
So I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. And I'm really so excited for you about this coming journey. And I hope that you enjoy every single moment of it, because it's really a beautiful thing. And it's really been just beautiful to have had a small part in this journey and to have witnessed it all these years. So congratulations to you, Bright Flame.
Thank you, Cynthia. It was so wonderful to connect again here publicly as we put this out and have everyone hear our stories.